Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday morning Sippin' Sports Show, broadcasting live from the K-Lot, Citizens Bank Park.
Yes,
I'm joined
sir.
by Chaos Chris, and KJ, unfortunately, is not here today, but we do have Broad Sports joining us at the game, the birthday boy. How you doing, Broad?
Thank you. Well, we've been planning this for weeks now because Dalton keeps texting me, yo, can you show up this Saturday? But I've always been working, but luckily today I have a day off, so I'm finally here.
He had a day off. It all worked out. God's plan. I'm glad I remembered to text you because I texted Chris and I was like, we should ask Broad if he wants to go to the game with us because I texted you for your birthday a couple weeks back and I was just like, hey, and it made me think of you. And all works out in a way, but we got a jam-packed show for you guys. Lot to talk about. Sanchez's shutout last night, Phillies Marlins game, which we are about to go into. So if you're here, come say what's up. Come hang out. We'll be tailgating until about 3:45. 3:30-ish, maybe going in a little bit early. Talking about the Flyers and Mishkov, the mad Russian on his way over, McCain to Philadelphia, and ending the show with a little bit of an upsetting topic. USA losing at their own sport, going down to Japan. But let's go ahead and kick it into our first topic with our guest. I mean, last night, Broad, how was that performance from Christopher Sanchez? What does that say for your team, state of your bullpen confidence-wise?
I mean, it was fantastic because we saw last week when Christopher signed his extension. I mean, he's thrown 2 gems since then because the first one he went, I think, almost 7 damn near perfect innings. Last night, a complete game shutout, which I also want to address this. This is a lot better than Thursday night's performance. That was the most frustrating game because I was like, Thursday night, how do you go from almost 7 damn near perfect innings of baseball to just forgetting how to play the sport in 30 pitches? A term that I love to use all the time because you know how inconsistent our team is sometimes. The phrase I always like to say is another gem from Wheels, just like opening day. Another gem from Wheels thrown right down the shitter. That's the best way I could have described Thursday night. But Friday night, I mean, the bats weren't clicking per se, but we were still able to come out and get the win. We got a big game tonight against the Marlins. I've just been really impressed with Sanchez. He has stepped up in a big way. I remember when he was called up the last couple of years, I'm like, are we really sure like he's going to be that guy? Because we don't have the reputation for having the best farm system because we're always trading away guys.
We gave up a big prospect for him.
Yes, we gave away a huge prospect for Sanchez compared to like teams like Detroit where they might not be the best now. Obviously, they're having a fantastic year so far, but they just kept building up their farm system for the future, and that's something that we weren't doing. We weren't doing. We were always just all in, guns blazing, no matter what. But I've been impressed with Sanchez so far.
Chris, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I was saying it a little bit last night on our post-game show. He was really, really, really good. Probably one of the 2 or 3 best performances we've seen all year. And, I mean, we've had near-perfect games, near no-hitters. And he was just, lights out, really consistent all night. That's what we've seen out of him all year. And it's been a really pleasant surprise. I said it last night with, he started to remind me there of Ranger. Where Ranger wasn't really stretched out yet, but it's still pitching really well. And that's what Sanchez was doing. And now that Sanchez is back, he's really, really pitching well. And he's stretched out. He's really a top 5 pitcher in baseball right now, which is amazing to say for your 4th or 5th starter. Like, that's crazy. I mean, if the pitching staff keeps pitching like this, it will carry us throughout the playoffs for sure.
It's been like so impressive for everybody. I mean, the one thing though that Chris and I talked about last night on the post-game show, Chris, I'll let you kind of get into this more than me. Injuries. It's apparent. It's no secret. I mean, this team's feeling it.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you lose Bryce Harper, who is the hottest player on the planet right now, maybe besides Ohtani, and Kyle Schwarber, who's starting to hit a bunch of homers. He's batting .250, probably the best season he's really had as a Philly so far. Losing those guys, you got the leadoff hitter and your number 3 hitter, both out. Plus, you're down to your 6th starting pitcher because you lost Walker and Turnbull. So who knows what we're going to have, injury-wise out of that.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. But also the one thing that we need to look at, I mean, injuries happen and it's unfortunate and we never want to see injuries. But the positive thing that we can say is that these injuries are occurring now compared to later in the season, in September, in October, when we really need these guys. So, like, we had the whole Trey Turner injury earlier on in the season. And, I mean, Edmundo and Witt and all those guys, they picked up the slack a little bit. Now Trey's back in the lineup. But it's kind of good that these injuries, and I don't want people to twist my words because, again, injuries are bad. But for the sake of the team, it's good that the injuries are occurring now in kind of like the midway point of the season compared to late September, early October as we're getting into our playoff stretch. Because it's the same thing with JT too. Because JT is a little bit banged up right now, so that's why we've been rotating between Marshawn and Stubbs. And I can't wait to have JT back in the lineup.
You're right. And I'm glad that some of the younger guys can kind of get that experience right now, too. We get to see, especially Philly Rob gets to see, what do I have with these younger guys so I know going into the postseason. So I like how you put it, Broad. Never wish an injury, but
they're not major. That's the biggest thing.
Like, what is Harper and Schwarber, you said, Chris? It's 10 days?
10 days-ish. I think they'll be back right after the All-Star break. So maybe a little bit before. But, just maybe it's going to give them maybe some rest, and they're going to play even better when they come back. It's unfortunate because they were both playing really well when it happened. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think they're going to be okay. It happens now. Maybe they can see what they have in some of these backup guys, keep these backup guys fresh, and we'll see what we can do in the playoffs.
Yeah. And losing players like Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber is never easy. Don't get me wrong. It sucks ass. I mean, Chris put it well last night on the show, too. Your 1-3 hitter. That's arguably your two most important hitters in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not easy. That's obviously going to throw off the momentum offensively. But I think that it's a good test for some of these younger guys, too, like Broad also alluded to earlier. So hopefully, with this upcoming Marlins series, they start to get it together. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you Marlins series. I believe it's a 4-game series, right, Chris?
Yep.
So we'll go ahead and start with our guest, Broad. Can you give me a prediction for the series, wins to losses, and what do you think is going to happen today?
I think that we'll be able to pull one out today. Like Thursday, our main issue was defense. Last night, even though we got the win, our main issue was bats because like our first run came on a fielder's choice ground out. So they really need to focus on getting the hits and playing very well defensively because Thursday night, that was just a really rare this season, bad performances from both Strahm and Hoffman. I mean, Strahm hit Jazz to load the bases, and De La Cruz, a bases clearing double. Josh Bell gets in with a double. But even then, also, we had to look back at the Detroit series when it was 0-0 at the bottom of the fifth with Ranger getting shelled, where it was bases loaded. Trey, I think he could have made the play at home, but he decided to go to first. Then you have a bases clearing hit. Then you have a stand-up triple. We can't be doing that. We really need to work on our defense, especially the middle infield, because a lot of the issues, especially Thursday, Edmundo had one come by him when he was playing short. We need to work on that, on our ground balls in the middle infield, short second. But we need to get the bats clicking, because if you're not going to get the bats clicking, you're rarely going to win a game. It does not matter if you have a defensive gem or not.
Yeah, and onto that, I think these next two games are. I know the Marlins haven't been great this year, but you can't slip too much because you do have the Marlins. You still got the Braves breathing down your neck, and the Mets are playing really well right now too. So you don't want to slip too far behind here. Keep that lead going. Maybe make it easier towards the end of the year where they can coast in the playoffs instead of fighting their way in and then not knowing what's going to happen next.
I think that they'll get the job done today. I just saw Nola's on the mound for us. Maybe would have put a lefty out there today, if that was me. I know Ranger is not, necessarily supposed to be out there today, but might have talked to him about that if that was me. Just because, like, I think the stat, I have it last night in my notes, but I think it was like 4-26 or something. The Marlins are this year against left-handed pitchers, which is just like an insane win-to-loss ratio. Yeah, 4-26 they are this year against left-handed pitchers. So I don't necessarily love the idea of putting Nola out there today, but he's 9-3 this year. So I think that the Phillies will get the job done today. Now, obviously, those are probable. Things can change, but that's who I think should get the job done today. I would say Phillies win today. I'll say that they win the series minimum 2-4, if not 3. I think that it's going to be a 3-4 because they obviously lost last night. So best case scenario is that they win the next 3 games. But when they lose the first game of the series, which is not often this year, they do bounce back accordingly. So I think that they should.
Yeah, and to your point with, maybe putting a lefty out there, I don't think you do that right now. Nola's been pitching well. You keep Nola out there. There's no reason to mess up what's been working well just because the team's playing bad. It's the Marlins. They suck. Kind of, throw your best pitchers out there and see what you can do.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I agree with Nola being out there because, like, how you were saying, 4-26 against left-handed pitchers. The thing is, they faced a lefty last night in Sanchez. So you can't just – rarely you will ever succeed in the MLB with back-to-back left-handed pitchers. When you're throwing lefties on back-to-back days, from what I've seen at least, I could be wrong, but at least with our team especially, when you go lefties on back-to-back days, there's rarely any time that we ever go 2-0. Most of the time it's either 1-1 or it's 0-2.
There's always a first for everything, gentlemen. I'll leave it at that. But hey, hopefully they get the job done today. I know we're all rooting for the Phillies. Looking forward to heading in there. If any of you guys will be at the game today, if any of you guys are going to be, hopefully it's another sellout today and another army of 44,252. But my goal, sorry, some wind is catching up with some people behind us at some plates in the K lot. My goal is that hopefully they get the job done today. My goal would be to meet some of you guys today. So if any of you guys are out here, please come hang out with us, meet up with us, because hopefully it's another sellout today. Like I said, another army of 44,000, and that crowd's getting rowdy, because when that crowd gets rowdy, this team finds a way to win. But transitioning now, talking about a little bit of hockey. It's not often here. So Tom Salucci, as I said on 302 Birds, get ready to speak Russian, buddy, because he's coming over. Matty Mishkov coming to Philadelphia to play for this team. I'll go ahead and kick it to Chris first, because I know he is a huge Flyers fan. Chris, how are you feeling about this move and the KHL granting him permission to come play in the USA?
It's awesome because it's a lot earlier than we thought. You got yourselves a probably top 3 or 4 prospect in last year's draft back a little bit later than they thought. So you're looking at, last year was one of those blue chip prospect drafts, and they got one of those blue chip prospects. The reason why he fell is because we didn't think he was going to be over here this soon. So really he had 1 year of playing in a really high Russian league and played really well. He had a ton of goals there. So for him to come over, and he's probably going to start for the Flyers this year, it's going to be really, really fun to watch. And maybe not playoffs this year, but very soon, because this was a really, really big acquisition.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. But like you were saying, this is a huge deal that we're getting him a year early, because especially with the KHL and the Russian hockey leagues, they like to stay committed to those specific contracts. There's always a bunch of total loopholes and a ton of paperwork that you always have to do in order to terminate contracts with most leagues around the world, like the KHL. I believe the German league is like that as well, and the OHL is also a pain in the ass sometimes. But I mean, it's a big deal that we're getting him a year early. I've seen some of his work. I really like his intensity. I do. I think that's a big thing that we were missing last year. Like, we were sitting comfortably in the first wild card spot with like 15 games to go. And then we went on that huge 8-game losing streak, which unfortunately kept us out of the playoffs. But what I saw was like the intensity just wasn't there. Because like we were playing teams like Montreal and Detroit. Well, I mean, Detroit was pretty solid last year, but like Montreal especially. Yes, they played the final 3 years ago in a really weird tournament thanks to COVID, but like we should be killing them. We should not be losing in Montreal 8-1 against the team that has consistently, again, minus 2021 and 2020 because of COVID and how the points were a little more lax. A team that has consistently been a bottom feeder in the league. Like, we just cannot be getting killed by these guys. So that's why I like bringing in Michkov and his intensity.
Yeah, and they were really showing flashes of being a really good team last year. Now you bring in another blue chip type guy. This may be the, Sidney Crosby or, the guy for the Oilers. What's his name? McDavid. I mean, he's that level of player. If he can develop into that, you got yourselves potentially a championship level team.
I think another great thing too is the story that this guy sells. Unfortunately, his dad passed away, but I think the way that he responded to it is so great. I mean, the dude has stepped up to the plate. He has really just mentally used it as fuel to kind of just level up his game. And before his dad passed away, his main goal for him was to make it to the NHL. Well, he's made it to the NHL now. What's your main goal when you make it to the NHL? It's to win a championship, to bring a Stanley Cup to your city. So I think that his dad's looking down on him extremely proud, but he also knows the job is just beginning. You know what I mean? And in a way, the Flyers almost benefit off of that or get an advantage because they're going to have a real player that's coming out with a real chip on his shoulder right now. You know what I mean? Just because of what he's went through. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, no, definitely I agree. But like, I'm also very excited for Michkov because he's excited to come here and play. Because like we had that whole issue with Cutter last year where he won the World Juniors and like when we drafted him, he was so excited, this and that. And then he's like, you know what, forget it. I'm not coming here. And it was just like the switch up was insane to me. But Michkov, I think he's also going to come in a little bit under the radar too this season because when you look at a ton of these rookies coming in, as well as like Connor Bedard, who won Rookie of the Year, which he was deserving of. He had a fantastic season. But you also look at some of the guys that were drafted last night, like Utah, the first ever selection in the Utah Hockey Club's history is a legend of the sport, Jerome McGinley's kid. You have Macklin Celebrini, who's been one of the most hyped #1 overall picks in, at least in our lifetime, for the NHL, for the San Jose Sharks. Like a lot of guys, they're going to be held to like almost God level pressure. I think that Michkov will have somewhat of pressure, but not as much as like those three guys, for example.
How are you guys feeling about Jet last night?
So, the Flyers drafted Jet Luchenko last night. I don't really know a lot about him. I know he's one of the younger guys in the draft class. He's 17 years old. He's not even 18 yet. So he's really fast, apparently, like the name Jet. We'll see what we have in him. But, everything we've seen out of Danny Briere and this staff so far, I just got to trust it. He may have been ranked 20th best prospect. And they drafted him at 13. But we'll see. If he's the right pick, he may not be, a superstar level player, but maybe they're drafting him and he's just going to be a really solid player. And that's what they were looking for. Not everything has to be a complete home run in the draft. If you think he's more of a sure thing than anything, then why not?
Yeah. Beautifully summed up, gentlemen. Thank you. You guys took pretty much the words out of my mouth. I just wanted to make that point about his dad. But pivoting now to our 76ers and their draft. So they go ahead and go out and take one of the best, if not, I think the best 3-point shooter in the draft. This kid gets better in the last couple of minutes in a basketball game. He is a competitive guy. He is a guy that just responds well to being under pressure. And that's exactly what this city has needed for the Philadelphia 76ers in such a long time. So Jared McCain is coming to the Sixers. A lot of people were upset, true Philly fans. I'll say the South Philly people. He paints his nails. He does this. He does that. All right. I'll say this. The kid can fucking make a basket and finally bring a championship to this city. I don't give a shit what he does. The kid can flat out play basketball. I mean, 41.4% from 3-point line last year. That's freaking nuts. 14.3 points per game on Duke basketball. And he had 2 games last year, one of them being against James Madison, which was an absolutely masterclass performance, but where he had 8 3-pointers in one game. That's fucking nuts. That's exactly what the Sixers have been longing for since Jimmy Butler has left. A guy that we can just kind of chuck the ball to. He's going to take the ball. He's not going to hesitate, and he's going to take the shot. That's exactly what the Sixers have been longing for. I love this pick. Let's go Sixers. How are you guys feeling?
Well, Dalton, I got to tell you, I disagree. I do. I did not like the Jared McCain pick whatsoever. Yes, he's a great 3-point shooter, but we don't need a defensive guard. We didn't. We needed a guy like Dalton Connect. He's 6'5". He's a good shooter. He could stretch out the floor because we had Tobias Harris leaving, and Tobias Harris was nothing defensively, but we need a guy who can stretch out the floor. Like you heard in his press conference, like, oh, I'm excited to work with Tyrese and Joel, and hopefully I can stretch. Hopefully you can stretch out the floor at like 6'6'1". Hopefully, compared to a guy who's 6'5" at Tennessee, carried them to the Elite Eight. At least in the first half, it looked like they could have almost beat Purdue. A guy like Dalton Connect, he can stretch out the floor. He's a great shooter. He's really good defensively, at least in college. Maybe it won't carry over to the NBA, but the fact that he ended up going with the next pick to the Lakers, like Dalton Connect, he was projected to be a top 10 pick. He was. And he kept falling and falling and falling. He was kind of like Cam Whitmore last year. Everyone thought Cam was going to go in the top 10, then he ended up going 20th to Houston. But when you keep seeing him falling and falling and falling, why did it not click in your head being like, let me go get the steal of the draft? Dalton fell to us. Let's take him. But no, you end up taking a 6'1" defensive guard over a 6'5" wing that can stretch out the floor.
Can I ask you one question real quick before Chris goes broad? Did you want, like, for you, is the pick definitely between, because for me, it's clear as day. It was either Necht or McCain. Are you in the same boat? It's between the two, or was there another guy that you even had over McCain? Or was McCain your second selection after Necht? Because I get the Necht hate. A lot of people were upset about that. I'll say this about him real quick. I think that you have more upside with McCain. I feel like Necht, we've kind of like already seen him grow. And you're right. He really carried Tennessee through to the Elite Eight. He was a stud this year in the tournament, but so was McCain too. So was there somebody else that you felt was over McCain, or was it you're just upset about Necht and you feel like that's the one that got away?
Yeah, I was more upset about Connect. I didn't necessarily think about another guy that I'd want in case we didn't get Connect, but I wasn't that big on Jared McCain to begin with at Duke. Like, yeah, he was really good. I didn't want Filipowski, so I'm glad, which we can side note, we can talk about his whole girlfriend grooming him into the Mormon culture thing.
Three TikToks for practice. I wanted to ask you too. How you feeling about all the TikToks that McCain's making? I mean, has he even like dribbled a basketball yet?
Not from what I've seen, no. But I do like the addition of Adam Boma from UCLA. I know this guy went undrafted. I don't know anywhere. I don't know if he was picked up by anyone, but like for the last 2 years, but then he kept going back to college. Like I wanted Armando Bacot from Carolina. Now he's with the Utah Jazz. But like another guy that we could have gotten as a backup center, which again, Adam, I love it. I've seen his play. He's very aggressive, very defensive oriented. He is a little bit smaller, but we wanted to go for a guy that was a little bit bigger. We and you, we've watched him all the time being have him here because he's a decent shooter for a big man, but he will wear you down in the paint. And also Dante from Oregon, I forget where he got drafted. Whoever picked him up, that was a great pickup for them. But I mean, we'll just have to wait and see what McCain does.
Yeah, I agree. I think Dalton Connect was probably the right pick. I think he was more NBA ready. And right now, you need people that are NBA ready. This team they're losing their window very, very quickly. And I'm not sure, how much longer Joel Embiid's going to be here, especially if they're going to do this. If you're taking McCain and you're saying, okay, maybe this is the last year of Joel Embiid, we're taking McCain is, somebody to grow with Maxey over time. All right, maybe it makes a little bit of sense, but I just think Connect was probably the right pick because he can play right now and he can play NBA minutes right now. And if you had to play a playoff game right now, I don't think McCain's playing in it at all. That's why I really don't like that pick.
Yeah, I get it. I definitely will say the guy, if I didn't have McCain, would have been him. Definitely top 10 talent, like you said earlier. So frustrating for some Sixers fans. Other Sixers fans, I would say, like myself, mediocre to it. There are a few, I would say, that are excited, which is great for McCain. I don't want McCain to, ever look back on his draft time, especially if he ends up being a stud like Tatum or somebody and being like, all right, well, I hated playing here. You guys were assholes, like when you drafted me. You know what I mean? So I never want to make a player feel that way. I'm just kind of at the point now where it's like we got him. Might as well make the best of it. Hopefully it goes well. Do either of you guys have anything to say about that before we wrap up? Pivot to the next topic.
I mean, the jury's out on McCain. It's up to him if he wants to ball out. But one other thing that I do want to say about this NBA draft. We hate them all. That team that wears green up in Boston, I will say, I'll give them somewhat of credit. They picked up a very talented guy from Creighton. Because I was in a group chat with people, and they're like, who is this guy? But, like, again, with me and Chris being Nova fans, we're Big East guys. We're very familiar with a lot of these guys. Like Stephon Castle, San Antonio, that was a great pickup by them. But Baylor Shireman to the Celtics. I mean, is it going to be like a Peyton Pritchard, Joey Hauser, where he's not going to get a lot of minutes, but he's going to be a good shooter? Yes, but Baylor,
You need those guys.
yeah, you need those. Yeah, you need those kind of guys, and Baylor is going to fit really well into that system up there in Beantown.
Yeah, I don't have really much more to say about this draft besides, fuck Rich Paul and fuck Bronny James and fuck LeBron James. What he did there should be like that should be criminal. You can't just force your way to a team. It's a draft for a reason. If he wanted to be a free agent, he should have told nobody to take him. The fact that, the Lakers just got a cupcake deal and got to draft him at 55 is just dumb to me.
That's like Paul.
Yeah, very, very interesting draft, to say the least. Now, actually moving on to our next topic, we do have a little bit of a call-in. My one uncle sent me a video. So if you guys didn't see, USA football lost to Japan, and it was shameful. I don't know how you lose as an American in American football. It was the U20s, but still, it's American football. Let's go ahead and take it to Coach real quick to see what he has. This is goddamn disgraceful. Now, I understand that there's some prior beef, prior things that we have with Japan, but none of that makes sense right now. I mean, how the hell did you get fucking David and Goliath by little brother? Japan just wanted it more. Your candy asses didn't come to play. Talking about this star-spangled ass whooping right now. I mean, how the fuck do you lose a sport that you invent? It's literally called American football. And you boys are getting fucking disgraced. I'll tell you how you fucking lose. You men didn't have any fucking heart. You got outplayed by the best fucking offensive line I think we've ever fucking seen. No shocker there. Sumo wrestlers, shocker, gentlemen, are going to make great offensive linemen. But you boys fucking disgrace this country. You disgraced yourselves. You disgraced me. I want to have a word with every college football head coach. I mean, I understand that some of you guys don't want your players going over there, being subject to injury. Totally get it. But this is fucking disgraceful. We got to get somebody over there, at least the JUCO schools, because this is fucking ass. Disgraceful. You let your country down. You let me down. I'm fucking suiting up next time around. That's my film review. That's all I got. Wow. Looks like my Uncle Coach is not happy about that. A lot of Americans are not happy about this. Before we get fully into this segment, I just want to read off this list for you guys. There's one guy that I would say stands out on this list. This is the national basketball team versus the national football team. National basketball team. This is just some of the notable alumni right now. So just think about this all-time NBA legacy, right? LeBron James, Embiid, Kevin Durant, Curry, Edwards, Booker. I'm just naming right now, just for example, not even to get into the GOATs. You're right. You're 100% right. This is the U20 football team all-time names. Ready? All-time. Not like we did all-time basketball like Broad alluded to, Michael Jordan. Chase Young. Jordan Poyer. Tyrann Mathieu. Mac Jones. Jonathan Taylor. Okay. Trayvon Diggs. Okay. Kenny Pickett. Elijah Vera Tucker. So when you look at like kind of just the gap in between talent of how we as Americans respect a sport, value a sport, I will say this, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first time I've ever even heard about the U20. I didn't even know there was tackle football that was a national team until now. So I will be watching it from here on out. I hope that the flag football team does a little bit better because, I mean, it's called American football. I don't know how you lose out of sport with your name in it, but I will say one last thing. That Japan offensive line, holy shit. And I can't say it's a shocker because sumo wrestling is so prevalent there, a sport where balance, agility, and strength are all prevalent. But oh my God, they just had their way with that American defense trying to just grab tackle. Did not look pretty.
Yeah, and you said this is U20.
U20, yeah. So
But
18, 20-year-olds.
a lot of the players that were playing for USA are high school kids. So whereas Japan will have their, like you said, they're much bigger. There's not many people that are in college playing for this U20 team. So like the guys that would be in there, like I think Shedeur Sanders is probably still 21 or is he 20 still? Like a lot of these guys, you know, they could have played last year or anything like that. Like Travis Hunter and all these guys could be playing in this, but aren't because there's really probably like no incentive to play in this unless you're like a really far out prospect that doesn't have a shot of really making, you know, a D1 team. Like I don't think where Jonathan Taylor transferred, I think. Like he wouldn't even go to a big school right away. A lot of these guys didn't go to big schools right away. So I just don't see this as being that big of a deal. Like everybody's freaking out because, you know, yeah, it's Japan beating USA, but these are like subpar players that are playing this.
Like the thing is, I have seen. Yeah, thank you. I have seen a couple of these Team USA football games, not just from this year, but also like, for example, when DeAndre Swift was in high school. Like I played against him in high school. I've seen like the U16 team for the USA. They lost. I forget who they lost to. I think it was either Cuba or like the Dominican Republic. Like Canada right now is the number one U20 team in the world. Am I surprised we lost to Japan? Honestly, and people might disagree with me on this, but no. Because like you could say, oh, this is your sport. You're supposed to be the best at this. Okay, well, in the U20 Cricket World Cup, the USA beat Pakistan, who is the number 6 team in the world, one of the best cricket teams in the world. Because when you think of cricket, you think England, you think Australia, Pakistan, and India, or even lacrosse world championships. Canada is supposed to be the number 1 team. This is their sport. That is their national sport. And what did the U.S. do? The U.S. crushed them in the final last year. It was not even close. USA is right now the number 1 lacrosse team in the world. But, like, obviously you think Canada, you think the U.S., you also think the Haudenosaunee, which, if you don't know what the Haudenosaunee is, that's the actual name of the Iroquois. Iroquois was, like, the European name that they were given, but the actual confederation itself, they're called the Haudenosaunee. So, at the last World Championship, they switched it from Iroquois to Haudenosaunee. But, like, you can't just say, like everyone's like, oh, this is their sport. Like, this is the sport that they're best at. Okay, how about you tell Louisiana Monroe that when they beat Alabama, and Appalachian State when they beat Michigan, who was the number 5 team in the country that year. It came in week 1. but they were the back-to-back defending national champions of the FCS. So, yeah, you could say all the time, like, oh, this is their sport, like the U.S. basketball too. But we've seen the U.S. lose the basketball games in games they should have never lost. You could say that about Brazil with soccer. Like, Copa America, you're the Brazil, you're the number 3 team in the world. You have some of the best players on your team. Eder Militao, you have Vinicius Jr., you have Jared Paqueta, one of the best goalkeepers in the world, Allison in net, with backup being one of the other best keepers in the world from Manchester City, Ederson. And you have a 0-0 draw against Costa Rica.
I will say too, Broad, you bring up a good point. It made me think about heart. And in any sport, it really matters. But I think like the Japanese breed athletes. They really do. The World Baseball Classic. I mean, they were also the underdog going up against America in their sport, and they won. I remember it was Mike Trout and Showtime Ohtani were facing off, and there was nothing, it was a great moment in sports, it felt like. But I don't know. For me, football has always been my sport to watch, so it's a little bit frustrating. But yeah, you make a good point though too. Like any given Sunday, especially in this sport, I should say.
Exactly, because in almost every sport, you see like, oh, these are supposed to be the teams that win, and they win. I'm just gonna exaggerate a number, but they win what, maybe 60% of the time. Like, oh, they're supposed to be the best. Like Purdue last year, they were like heavy national championship favorites. They lose round 1 to Fairleigh Dickinson, a team that, with some people's standards, technically weren't even supposed to make the tournament, but they still made it. Upset number 1 Purdue. Or even 2018 UVA. UVA entered in as the number 1 overall team in the entire tournament. No one seed had ever lost to the 16th seed up at that point. And not only did they lose, but it was belt to ass. They got their asses handed to them that night by UMBC.
I love you, Broad. That was a great analogy. I'm not going to lie. But that's pretty much all we have for you guys this morning on Sippin' Sports. I want to take a quick second to thank our guy, Broad Sports, for joining us as our guest host today. Hopefully this won't be the last time we get him on here. Like he said, he didn't have work today. We were able to get the legend, the GOAT, here. So if you guys aren't doing anything, come meet up with us. We'll be going into the ballpark. The 3 of us will be sitting together, I think around section 307. Yeah, he's right. We looked at 107, but I almost bought tickets for the wrong day. Thank God I didn't. Yeah, that would have been so bad. I've done it before. Hopefully I'll never do it again. Can't say I can confirm that. But my name's Dalton. You can follow me at 302 Birds. You can follow Chris at Chaos Chris, and you can follow Broad, of course, at Broad Sports. And if you guys are here, come tailgate in the K-Lot. We're right under, I guess, K30. What is it?
K34.
K34. So come hang out. But hope everybody has a good Sunday. As always, God bless. Go Phils.
Morning.